Alright, good morning everybody. My name is David. I'll be your host today from Trucking From Home. Today I'm going to be showing you how to hook up your own DIY gauge setup for your rig at home. So before we even get started with the box here that's in front of you, first thing I want to show you is what we are exactly looking at. This setup here in front of you is the 387 dash cluster. I actually purchased this from eBay, and it was for about $207. I was shopping around for something like this for quite some time and found some for $500, $700. This was by far the cheapest. You might find some that is even cheaper than this, and that'll be great. But something else I learned about this gauge cluster before I bought it was that it may or may not work with a Sim Projects chip. And me, I'm the kind of guy, if you say that it doesn't work, I'm going to try it anyway just to see if I can make it work. But lo and behold, trial and error, it does not work. These gauges do not work with the Sim Project chip, which is still fine for me because I still wanted the authentic Peterbilt gauge cluster. So I went ahead and purchased it anyway, knowing that there could be a potential risk that these gauges may not work. So I went ahead and purchased this dash cluster, and then I went and purchased the Sim Projects chip that you see right here in front of you. This thing does have 6 gauges that you can hook up in addition to a speedometer and a tachometer as well. It is very nice, easy to use, easy to hook up. You'll see here that you do have your ground switch here, your power switch here, your ground switch here, and then also there's some ground here for your additional gauges. This is, again, very easy to use. Up here you have the light switch that's here. This is really easy if you want to use this light switch. Any plugins that you put in here would need to go through a relay. And what would happen is whenever you start this app, it would turn on the lights on your dashboard that you have in your DIY setup. So I do not have that relay right now, but I still managed to plug up my lights so that whenever I turn on this chip, the whole entire dash cluster comes on. So, and then you have your own exclusive independent switch for your speed, and then your own independent switch here for your RPMs. Okay, so again, this chip is very easy to use. I believe it was about $40, or excuse me, actually no, $66.90. So it's actually pretty nice. You will need to purchase your own plug for this if you do not have one, and you will need to purchase a USB cord with it as well. It will not work if you do not have the USB, so you do need to find a way to plug this up to your computer. So make sure that you do have the USB plug up as well. The gauges that I bought 3 of them. The first one I bought was the speedometer here. Very easy to use. It does come with either yellow lighting or a white light that comes behind it. I prefer to use the white light rather than the yellow, just because it's a little bit easier for me to see, especially in the dark. So I like the white. The next one that I bought was the RPMs. Again, same thing, had the yellow light, had the white light. I chose to go with the white light, and I'll show you that in my hookup here in a minute. But this one was very nice to use. It's very accurate too, and I'll show you how to hook that up and make sure that it works well with your game. And then the last thing that I bought for a gauge was the fuel gauge. And this is amazing too, especially when I'm at a gas station and I am filling up. Watching that needle move from E to full is entertaining for me, just because how it works in real time. So the next thing I do want to show you as well is that these are all the gauge controllers that you could buy from Sim Projects. So if you have not visited Sim Projects yet, please do so, because there's so many different options of things that you can do. They can even simulate, if you have a full-size dash, you can actually go to, I believe it's going to be with joystick controllers. You can actually buy a fan that can plug into one of these joystick controllers, and excuse me, this is the fan controller. You can actually plug this fan into this fan controller, and it will simulate, like if you have your windows down in the truck, it would actually simulate that to your rig that you have at home, and actually this fan will turn on and start blowing some air. I mean, it's pretty awesome to have that. So again, it's just, there's so many different things that you can do. And like we were just looking at some of the joystick controllers, you got buttons you can have, some auxiliary switches you can have. And if you're buying dashboard kits from eBay or from whatever, and you have the rocker switches that come with some of the dash kits, you can purchase this chip right here and actually hook up those switches. That's going to be something I'm going to be showing in my next video that I'm going to be doing here in the next few weeks, is showing you how to hook up those rocker switches and make them work to your game and fit your needs, to really immerse you into the game. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the box now, and I'll show you what we are looking at. Again, before we leave here, make sure you visit Sim Projects. I will be sure to drop that link down below so you see what we are looking at. Okay, so this is the gauge cluster, and the one that I purchased from eBay. It is a 387 dash. You're looking right behind it. I do have, like I mentioned before, I do have the chip here that is set up. I do already have the wires plugged up here. So this first wire, you see this white wire here, this is actually for my fuel sensor. The RPM is this green wire that I have set up. The speed is this blue wire that I have here. And then of course you got your power and your ground down here. When you plug these wires into these screws, make sure that you do not have any excess wire hanging out that could possibly touch any of these other metal surfaces, because if you do, you can quick short something out, especially if these negative and positives touch together. So you want to make sure that you have it very secure, very tight, and that you do not have excess wires showing. Okay, so, and again, I'll show you up here as well. You do have the light switch that's here. Again, you can use this light switch if you want to plug your lights into here, you can. And whenever you start the sim application, it will actually turn your lights on for you. It's actually pretty cool, but you have to have a relay switch that will work with that. Your speedometer, again, your RPM, and then you can have 6 auxiliary gauges hooked up. I have one hooked up now, that's my fuel. I will be purchasing other gauges here very soon, and I will also show another video how to hook those up. Alright, so let's get into the gauge cluster itself. Let's go ahead and put that chip away, make sure that stays out of our way for right now. I just have that over to the side like that, as you can see. So this is the actual gauge cluster, and if you have never dealt with wires before, this may look kind of stressful, and really it's not. So I want to tell you that, again, this original gauge cluster, all the gauges that came in here were original for a Peterbilt, and unfortunately they did not work, and I'll show you what one of them actually looks like. This is the actual speedometer from a Peterbilt, from this Peterbilt dashboard. It's pretty awesome. I was hoping I could really use this just because of the authenticity of it and just to have something real, you know what I mean? But unfortunately it would not work. There's a motherboard and chip inside here that gets this coding from this dash plate that's here and feeds out information to all these gauges and tell them what to do. Unfortunately, I don't have those buses that carry those codings, so I cannot use this. But what I did do was figure out what each of these wires do. So I know that there's a red and there's a black on here, which generally speaking, universal, that would be your power and your ground. Power being your red, black being your ground. Went ahead and spliced those, hooked them up to the chip to see if this will come on, and which it did. It was able to, it moved a little bit, but there was no lighting. So then my next wire that I wanted to see which one did my lighting, and the blue wire in here actually does that. So I wanted to see how that works so I can get the rest of the clusters to work with when I power up my 2 gauges that I have in here. So this one here is my RPM, this one here is my speedometer, and then I have my gauge, my fuel gauge is all the way over here. So again, the first thing I wanted to do is learn what wires that I have and what does what. So looking at my RPM right now, I can tell you that the ground is black, okay? which is going to be right here. My ignition is red, okay? And then my lamp is going to be the white light. You can have the white or you can have the yellow. All right, I prefer to go with my white, just my own preference, just because it's easier on my eyes to see. And then there's a signal, what actually moves the needle. All right, and the wire that moves the needle is going to be this brown wire that's right here. Okay, so I took this red wire and hooked it up to this gauge that's right here. Again, this is the original gauge that came with this cluster. I went ahead and spliced these two wires together so they both have the same power. Once this one comes on, this one will come on as well. And then I went ahead and transferred that energy, that wire, all the way to the other left side of this gauge cluster so I can work on my fuel over here. So I took the same power wire from the fuel and hooked that up into the transferring wires from over here. So now all these gauges right here, they do have power. And then also I'm going to make sure that they also have the ground. So I took my ground wire from this RPM, plugged it into this gauge cluster over here, and transfer that energy over to here so that, again, when this cluster comes on, it's going to wire all of these together, turn them all on together at once, and you can see that they're already grounded. This is grounded, this is grounded, they're all grounded together using one source of energy without having to hook up each individual cluster individually. I did not want to do that. That would be a hell of a lot of wires and it'll be a mess in here. So I don't like to deal with that. I like wire management, as you can see, using the clips over to the side so that I don't have much of a mess and I know what I'm dealing with. So that's the first cluster to deal with. The next one here is the speedometer. The speedometer has again a black wire. This is for your ground. It has the ignition wire. That's your red. That's your live wire. And then again the white. That's my white lamp that works behind the dash cluster. And then your signal wire is going to be this blue one here. Okay. And that signal, again, so I'm going to show you this signal is this blue wire. That blue wire is plugged into this chip on the RPM switch. That brown wire is plugged into this switch over here. Okay, and notice I have everything unplugged right now because I do not want to experience electrocution on live video today. So everything is off. All right, and then my fuel switch is over here. My fuel, it came with a black and red wire. Again, that's your positive and your negative, your live wire, your ground wire. And then there's some switches here for the lamp, which is going to be just a simple white light. There is not an option for a yellow on this fuel, and that's another reason why I chose white for these two gauges here, because I wanted to make sure that it matched my fuel up here. And then of course I had to ground this as well, which is already wired into the ground on these other two gauges here. So everything has one source of power, one source of ground, without having to go many different directions at once. So this was actually a pretty easy setup to have. And once I start buying more gauges, I will take these gauges out and I will go ahead and install my new gauges inside. I still will be buying the oil pressure, the oil temperature, water pressure, water temperature, things like that. That was going to be going into this gauge cluster. It's going to be pretty awesome when it's all said and done. So what happens now when you have your gauge clusters all hooked up together, the chip is ready to go. Now what's the next step before turning on your gauge to make sure that they actually work? So we do have an application that comes with the gauges, which I'm going to be showing you today. And first let me go ahead and get this hooked up for you so I can show you exactly how this is going to work. Once you have set everything up, everything has been grounded, you make sure that no wires are touching, everything over here looks good. You want to make sure that before you put any power into this, that you have a clear table. That way you do not risk a shot to yourself or a fire. So, and I already know I have a clean setup here. I'm just good like that. So give me 1 second. We'll go ahead and get everything powered up. And while I'm doing this, I'll show you that the white cord, this is that USB that I was telling you about that you need to purchase with this in case you don't have your own already. This is going to wire into your computer. This cord here is your AV cord. This is your power cord, all right, that you need to plug in for your power source. If you already have a cord like that, this is fine, but also you want to make sure it has the right voltage as well. So I will prefer that you receive the one or purchase the power source that actually comes with the chip as an option from some projects. All right, so now I'm going to show you what it actually looks like when you have the chip set up. Okay, so this is the application that you will need to download for this chip to actually work, and it is called SimDash. There's a lot of things you can get with SimDash. There's a lot of things you can do. As you can see here, they have a rev burner, they got the gauges, they got the LED screens and so forth. I mean, there's so many different things you can do. It is freaking crazy. So for those who are doing a way better DIY project than me, Sim Projects is the way to go. If you're going to have a full dash that will have limitless options, make sure that you go with Sim Projects and hook up this application, all right, to really give yourself that immersion into the game. So let's go into configuration. For each setup in the game, you are going to have different ways that your needle is going to move, and you need to set this up so that it reads accurately. If you do not move these needles here at all, sometimes your gauge will not move or it will move too much. So what I would suggest is that you look at these needles and look at your power switch, look at your gauges to make sure that your needles are moving where they're supposed to. So for something that's really easy here, I'm just going to look at the gauge cluster, okay, for fuel. And I'm going to show you something here so you can understand what I'm saying as far as moving the needles. So right now, the gauge cluster is on. All right. You'll see that the original gauges are going kind of haywire right now, and that's because they are trying to receive coding from this here that tells it, okay, where am I supposed to be going right now? But my gauges are not plugged into this motherboard here, so they're kind of just doing their own thing right now. And they are working on a sensor where if the needle moves to a certain point here, this light just automatically turns on. It's kind of cool how it does that. But my gauges that I bought for this would be the RPM, miles an hour, and also the fuel gauge that's right here. And this is the one that I'm going to be showing you today, about just letting you see how it actually works. So right now, it looks like it's on a 3/4 of a tank is what we have in here right now. And what I'm doing is I am configuring my screen. See if I can do both at the same time here and show you what I'm working with. All right, so I'm going to move these needles so that you can see exactly what I mean. So first of all, let's look at the 50%. All right, when I test this out, this needle should move to half a tank. So I'm going to press the test button that's here. Okay, and again, I'm going to show you what that looks like on this big screen here. That is going to be your test button. When you push this needle should move to half a tank, and if it doesn't, you need to move this to the left or to the right until it does move there. So as you move this needle, you're going to see that your needle is also going to be moving. Okay, so again, we're going to move this a little bit, and you'll see it start to move. And I just want, since I'm configuring the half tank measurement, I want to make sure that I move this needle so that it's on that marker. And I'm going to do that same thing for the rest of these switches here. As I test, okay, this is where it's going to be for empty. This is where it's going to be for 1/4 of a tank, half a tank, 3/4, and full. All right. As you test these out, that needle needs to move to that area. The RPM switch was really difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. This one was difficult to set up. It was not as easy. There was a lot of movement going on. And quite honestly, it was throwing me off a little bit. But I was able to figure it out. So here I'll show you what I'm talking about with the gauge cluster for the RPMs. So for the RPMs, you actually have this one here, and it likes to not move when you want it to move. So you need to have the needle set up again and test it out to make sure that it's going to be right. And the way that you'll do that is you sync it up with your chip. Sorry, I have cats in the background. They like to be annoying right now. So again, this is your testing strip to see how far these can move. And so for the first one, I have at 3%. So I'm going to touch this test to see what it does, and it should move just a little bit. Because again, it's only 3%. All right. Then I'm going to test it for 5%. Where does it go? And 10%. You see the needle moving? Let's do 35. All right. That's how that gauge should move. And I test this out with the gain to make sure that it's also accurate, that if I am revving at 1,000 RPMs in my truck, that this actually is measuring what I'm actually doing in the truck. And then the same thing for the speedometer here as well. Let's go to that gauge. And I'm just going to test what's 5 miles an hour on here. I'm just going to hit this test button here, and it should move 5 miles an hour, 8 miles an hour, 17, 25, 34, 42, 51, and 59. So this shows that my measurements on the screen actually does show where this needle needs to be. If you find that it's not doing that, you can play with this back and forth. You can play with this measurement back and forth to make sure that you get what you want it to be. Okay, so that's how easy these clusters are to hook up. There's going to be some tedious work that you need to do to get them accurate, which takes some time. You can go ahead and make sure that happens. But it's really nice to see these gauges actually work once your game is already hooked up. So now I'll actually will show you. If we go to the game, so now what we do is we want to show you that if we turn it on, screens right here. Okay, so if we go ahead and turn it on, you can see that the RPM has already moved. It's already moved up. Let's see that again. Okay. And then if we were to restart it again, kind of cool, right? And then if we were to give it some gas, put it in gear. All right, back in neutral. So These gauges actually move in real time with the gauge cluster. It is absolutely amazing that that is actually able to happen. And I will be, like I said, I will be hooking up more gauges to go along with this, and add some more immersion into the game. Some water sensors and pressure sensors will be added to this gauge cluster to bring some more immersion. The next thing that I did want to show you will be my dash cluster for my radio that I have. And this, let's see if I can actually show you from here. So this is actually from a 389 dash cluster, and it actually came with the original radio. I took the original radio out and put a aftermarket radio in, and it actually does work. It's pretty awesome. I'll be showing that in the next video on how to hook that up. But today I just wanted to focus on the gauge cluster, just because of how intense this was and how amazing it works, and the technology really behind this to immerse us into the game. So I hope this was beneficial for everyone to see. And if you have any questions, drop them below. And also, if you have your own DIY project, your own rig at home, I would like to see what that looks like. If you want to share some pictures below in the comment section, or if you can actually share your profile, that way we can view, and we can also subscribe, like, comment, and share. Again, I hope this was beneficial. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.